Have you noticed that something quietly ended recently? A relationship that used to feel certain, a job that no longer fits, a dream you held onto for years, one you're not even sure you believe in anymore. What if that ending wasn't simply a loss? Across many spiritual traditions, people believe that life sometimes closes one door before another can truly open. Not with noise, not with warning, but quietly, in the background of your everyday life, while you're busy trying to hold everything together. Tonight, we're exploring 7 symbolic signs that many people notice during times of personal transition. Not promises, not predictions, just patterns. Patterns that some people find meaning in, and patterns you might recognize in your own life right now. Stay with me until the end, because the 7th sign is the one most people miss completely, until it's already changed everything. Let's begin. There is a moment that happens right before every major change in a person's life. It's subtle. It doesn't come with fireworks or clarity. It comes as a feeling, a low hum underneath your normal routine, like something is shifting, even though nothing on the surface has changed yet. Think about the biggest turning points in your own life. The move to a new city, the end of a relationship that once felt permanent, the decision to leave something familiar and safe for something uncertain. If you look back honestly, none of those moments announced themselves clearly in advance. They crept in slowly. A small discomfort here, a strange coincidence there, a conversation that stayed with you longer than it should have. Many people who look back on their biggest life changes describe the same thing. Before anything visibly changed, they felt different first. Restless, unsettled, quietly aware that something in their life no longer matched who they were becoming. This is what we might call the invisible shift, the space between who you were and who you're turning into. It's uncomfortable because you're standing in between 2 versions of your own story, and neither one feels fully solid yet. If you're in that space right now, you are not falling apart. You may simply be in the middle of becoming something new, and that discomfort often shows up first in the smallest, strangest way, in the things that used to make you happy. That brings us to the first sign. Sign 1. Things that once excited you no longer feel right. Maybe it's a job you used to love, one that gave you purpose and pride, but lately it feels hollow, like you're just going through motions. Maybe it's a social circle you used to enjoy, but the conversations feel repetitive now. The laughter feels distant, like you're watching your own life from outside a window. This isn't ingratitude. It isn't failure. Many people describe this exact feeling right before a major turning point in their lives, the sense that the things which once fit you perfectly have quietly stopped fitting. Think of it like a coat you used to wear every winter. It kept you warm for years. But one day, without deciding to, you notice it's too tight across the shoulders. You didn't do anything wrong. You simply grew, and the coat stayed the same size. This is often one of the earliest signs of internal change. Before your outer life shifts, your inner world shifts first. Old goals stop lighting you up. Old routines start feeling like static instead of comfort. And it can be confusing, even a little frightening, because you don't yet know what's supposed to replace it. But here's something worth sitting with. Growth rarely announces its arrival. It usually announces its departure first, the departure of everything that no longer belongs. And if that detachment is already happening to you, you may start to notice something else too. Something you didn't ask for, and definitely didn't expect. Sign 2. Unexpected endings keep appearing. A friendship fades without explanation. A job opportunity falls through at the last moment. A plan you were certain about collapses out of nowhere. At first, it can feel like bad luck, like the universe has decided to test you specifically. But many people who've lived through major life transformations describe this exact pattern. Endings that arrive in clusters, almost as if life is clearing space rather than punishing them. Consider the stories so many people share. They lost a job they thought they'd have forever, only to look back years later and realize that loss pushed them toward work that fit them far better. Or they went through a breakup that felt devastating at the time, only to eventually understand that the relationship had been quietly holding them back from becoming who they needed to become. This doesn't mean every ending is secretly a blessing in disguise. Some endings are simply painful, and it's okay to sit with that pain honestly instead of rushing to find a silver lining. But many spiritual traditions suggest that repeated endings, especially when they arrive together in a short span of time, often signal the closing of an entire chapter, not just a single page. If endings have been following you lately, ask yourself honestly, is life removing things from you, or is it clearing space for something you haven't met yet? Because right after the ending comes something even stranger. Something that makes you stop in your tracks and wonder if you're imagining things. Sign 3. Repeating patterns or meaningful coincidences. You keep seeing the same number everywhere. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and an hour later they text you. You overhear a stranger's conversation, and it answers a question you've been quietly asking yourself for weeks. Psychologists sometimes describe this as pattern recognition. Our brains are wired to notice connections, especially when we're emotionally invested in finding meaning. But many people across cultures and traditions describe these coincidences as something more personal. They call them synchronicities, moments that feel too aligned, too specifically timed to be pure chance. Whether you interpret these moments as spiritual signs or simply as your mind highlighting what matters most to you right now, one thing remains true: they tend to increase during periods of transition. When you're on the edge of change, your senses seem to sharpen. You notice things you would have walked past a year ago. Some people keep a quiet list of these moments, almost like a private map only they can read. And often, looking back, the map points toward exactly the change they were too afraid to make. If these moments have been happening to you, you already know what I mean. And if they haven't yet, pay closer attention over the next few days. Because sometimes the universe doesn't shout, it simply repeats itself until you finally look up. But awareness alone isn't enough. Because right when you start noticing these signs, life often pushes you somewhere you never planned to go. Sign 4. You're being forced out of your comfort zone. Maybe it's a sudden move, a layoff, a diagnosis, a relationship ending without your permission. Life doesn't ask if you're ready. It simply removes the ground you were standing on and waits to see what you'll do next. This is often the most painful sign of all, because it doesn't feel symbolic in the moment. It feels like crisis. Your heart races. Your mind spirals with questions you can't answer. You feel like you're standing at the edge of something with no map and no guarantee of a soft landing. But consider this. Nearly every meaningful transformation in a person's life happened because they were pushed, not because they jumped willingly. Comfort rarely asks us to change. Discomfort does the asking for us. Think about a seed buried underground. It doesn't choose to break open on its own. The pressure of the soil, the darkness, the isolation, these forces crack it open so something new can finally reach toward light. The seed doesn't experience that process as gentle. It experiences it as the end of everything it knew as safe. If your comfort zone has been ripped away recently, you are not being punished. You may be standing exactly where growth requires you to stand, uncomfortable, uncertain, and closer to change than you've ever been. And in that uncertainty, something curious begins to happen. Something quiet, but impossible to ignore. Sign 5. You feel pulled towards something you can't explain. Maybe it's a new interest that appeared out of nowhere, a city you suddenly feel drawn to, even though you've never been there. A creative idea that keeps returning to your mind at 3 in the morning, refusing to let you sleep until you write it down. This pull rarely comes with logic. It doesn't explain itself, it simply insists. Many people describe this feeling as intuition, an inner compass pointing towards something before the mind has any evidence to justify it. Some call it curiosity, others call it a calling. Whatever name you give it, the feeling tends to intensify during periods of change, almost as if your inner self already knows the next step before your conscious mind catches up. Think of the countless stories of people who left stable careers to pursue something that made no financial sense on paper, only to look back years later and realize that unexplainable pull had been guiding them toward exactly where they belonged. You don't have to act on every pull immediately, but it's worth asking yourself, what has been quietly calling to you lately, even if you can't explain why? Because as that pull grows stronger, something else often grows quieter. And it might be the hardest sign to accept. Sign 6. Old relationships begin to fade. Not through conflict, not through anger, just distance. The kind that grows slowly, without a single dramatic moment to point to. You call less. They call less. Conversations that once felt effortless now feel like work. And it hurts, because there was no fight, no betrayal, nothing you can name as the reason things changed. Many people describe this as one of the most disorienting parts of personal transformation. We expect endings to come with explanations. But often relationships fade simply because two people are growing in different directions, at different speeds, toward different versions of themselves. This doesn't mean the relationship was wrong, or that the people in it failed each other. Sometimes people are meant to walk beside you for a season, not for a lifetime. And when that season ends, it can feel like grief, even when nothing bad actually happened. If you're losing touch with people who once felt essential to your life, it might not mean you're doing something wrong. It might mean you're simply moving toward a chapter they're not part of, and that's allowed to be true, even when it's painful. And once that quiet distance settles in, something else begins to stir. Something you can feel, but can't quite name. Sign 7. A quiet sense that something is about to change. This is the sign most people overlook completely, because it doesn't look like anything. It's not an event. It's not a coincidence. It's a feeling, a stillness in your chest, a sense of anticipation without a clear reason, like standing backstage before a performance you didn't know you were going to give. You can't point to evidence for it, you just feel it. A quiet knowing that life is about to shift, even though everything around you looks exactly the same as it did yesterday. Many people describe this feeling right before the biggest turning points of their lives. A strange calm settling in right before the storm of change, almost like their soul already knew what was coming before their circumstances caught up. If you've been feeling this lately, this quiet, wordless sense that something is about to move, it doesn't mean you need to predict the future or force anything to happen. It simply means you might be more ready than you realize. So if all 7 of these signs have been quietly present in your life, the detachment, the endings, the coincidences, the discomfort, the pull, the fading relationships, and this final quiet feeling, the question isn't whether change is coming. The question is, what will you do while you wait for the door to open? Let's talk about that. Reflection is not about sitting still and hoping for answers to fall into your lap. It's about creating space so you can actually hear yourself think underneath all the noise of daily life. Start simple. Each night, write down 3 things. One thing that felt different today, one thing you released without meaning to, and one thing you're quietly curious about. You don't need perfect sentences. You don't need profound insight. You just need honesty. Over time, patterns emerge on the page that were invisible in your head. Alongside reflection, practice presence. Not the pressure to feel calm all the time, but simply noticing where your feet are, what you're hearing right now, what's true in this exact moment instead of the future you're afraid of or the past you can't change. Even 2 quiet minutes a day of simply breathing and noticing can loosen the grip of anxious thinking. Gratitude works the same way. Not forced positivity, not pretending everything is fine when it isn't, but a simple, honest acknowledgement of what's still good, even in the middle of uncertainty. A roof over your head, a person who checked in on you today, a moment of unexpected laughter. These small acknowledgements don't erase pain, but they remind you that your life still contains light, even during a season of change. And then there's the hardest part, releasing fear enough to take one small, intentional action. Not a leap, not a dramatic life overhaul, just one small step. Sending the message you've been avoiding, researching the idea that keeps pulling at you, having the honest conversation you've been putting off. Doors rarely swing wide open on their own. Usually, they open because someone finally reached out and pushed, even while their hands were shaking. You don't have to have everything figured out. You just have to be willing to move one small step at a time, even without knowing exactly where the path leads. So let's bring it all together. Something in your life felt wrong before it changed. Endings kept appearing, clearing space you didn't ask for. Strange coincidences caught your attention. Your comfort zone was disrupted, sometimes gently, sometimes violently. An unexplainable pull started guiding you somewhere new. Old relationships quietly faded into the background, and underneath it all, a quiet sense settled in, the feeling that something is about to change. None of this guarantees a specific outcome. Life doesn't work in guarantees, and anyone who promises you certainty about the future is offering comfort, not truth. But many people, looking back on their most difficult chapters, describe this exact sequence of signs right before their lives transformed into something they couldn't have imagined at the time. So, if you've been standing in the middle of an ending lately, wondering why it hurts so much, wondering if you did something wrong, wondering if you'll ever feel steady again, consider this. Maybe you're not falling. Maybe you're simply standing in the doorway, caught between who you were and who you're becoming. And that in-between space is uncomfortable precisely because it's meaningful. Tell me in the comments, which of these 7 signs have you noticed in your own life recently? Sometimes just naming it out loud is the first step through the door. Perhaps the greatest opportunities don't arrive with loud announcements. Sometimes they begin the quiet moment you finally find the courage to let go of the door that's already closing. This video is intended for inspirational and entertainment purposes. Spiritual ideas discussed here reflect beliefs, traditions, and personal interpretations. They should not be considered factual predictions, guarantees, or professional advice. Your choices and actions always play the most important role in shaping your future.